I've always been a huge fan of having depth in a photo. As I look through my portfolio of images, my favorite photos always have that sense of depth. There's several different ways to create that depth in a photograph, and in this video we're going to show you how I create depth in my images. The first and most obvious way to create depth in an image is to get stuff close to the camera. So if you get really close to a foreground object, maybe it's a tree, maybe it's rocks in the foreground, the sense of depth is going to be amplified because you have things close to the camera and far away. The second element that really helps with depth is a sense of atmosphere. You see this a lot in scenes that have fog or mist in the scene, and the reason that those images always work so well is because it really amplifies the sense of depth. Things close to the camera are contrasty and clear, and as things get further away from the camera, they start to lose their contrast. The deepest shadows in the objects far away from camera no longer reach the far left of the histogram. They no longer reach those deep shadows. They actually only reach about the mid-tone area of the histogram. This loss of contrast gives this sense that you're obviously looking through a lot of atmosphere. Sometimes when we're post-processing images, that sense of atmosphere gets lost because we spend a lot of time adding contrast into our raw files. And if we're adding that contrast globally to the entire photo, oftentimes the things along the horizon of the image get too contrasty and you lose that sense of depth. So in post-processing, I try to keep this in mind, and I never allow things close to the horizon to get too contrasty. Sometimes I'll actually embellish the sense of atmosphere and decrease contrast to the part of the image that is farthest away from camera. This technique can really help a forest scene image because it's going to simplify the composition. The eye is always going to be drawn to contrast. And if you have a forest scene that is contrasty everywhere, it's going to distract the viewer's eye. But if you have an image where there's areas of strong contrast and other areas that are far less contrasty, the eye is going to skip over the less contrasty areas and be drawn to those high contrast areas. In this way, you can have kind of a chaotic, cluttery scene, but still be able to manage the viewer's visual path. Another element that really helps with depth is the difference between your shadows and your highlights. By emphasizing the highlights in a dark, shadowy part of the photo, you're increasing contrast and you're giving a greater sense of depth in that part of the image. This, again, is a really useful technique for drawing the viewer's eye through a shot. Depth, dimension, and atmosphere are three things that I'm always hoping to have in one of my photographs, and hopefully this video will help inspire you guys to try to incorporate it into your own photography.